Great segue into us. It is maybe, we would say it's the most important problem. It's doing the classical error correction, right? Okay, so at Riverlane, what do? We are building the quantum error correction stack, right? So out of all these quantum error correction schemes, you're going to have some signals that are coming out from measuring the qubits that are characterizing the errors that are on your system, and that becomes a massive classical processing problem that needs to be solved. And you need to develop a quantum error correction stack to handle that. And that is what we are building. I think there's two important messages that I want to get across today. One, the error correction stack is not just about a decoder, right? Everyone thinks it's just a decoder and that's the only thing. You have to care about multiple decoders, moving information around in a certain way. So I think, and how you window various things. So I think that's a really important message to get. And the other thing that's been touched on in various talks today is interfaces are really, really important. So they're my two main messages. If that's all you remember, I've done my job. Right, so we're all on this path to utility quantum scale. We at Riverlane don't think it's going to be a cliff. We think it's going to be a journey, right? That sounds very like some reality show or something. But we're going to start thinking about the megaquark, and then we need to transition to the gigaquark and then to the teraquark, where you're basically getting more computational power from the quantum system, and you can do more and more cool things. The thing that we're focusing on at the moment is the megaquark. Now, I want to highlight the fact, I'm not sure if Roger's still here, but one of the UK quantum missions for 2028 is to develop megaquark capabilities. And there's £500 million that has just been announced. Maybe some of that should go to help developing these megaquark capabilities. And also, I think a speaker previously said that Presco came up with megaquark. I'm not sure who came up with it. If you go look back at the timestamps, we might have been seeding that word out there in the world to try and get him to say it. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, what is megaquark? You're talking about 1 million reliable quantum operations. And we at Riverlane see this as a real inflection point for the quantum computing industry. Really, like, we're not saying you have utility quantum scale at this stage, but what you do have are devices that are able to do real novel scientific discovery. With these devices, you'll be able to do things that you cannot simulate classically. So we think this is a really important inflection point for the industry. We think it's going to be something around about 100 logical qubits, roughly maybe 10,000 physical qubits, and you'd have about a logical depth of about 10,000 as well. Okay, so just high level, what is error correction all about? High level, basically, you're adding redundancy. So you're spreading your information across a bunch of physical qubits into something that is a logical qubit that has a better error rate than your physical qubits and that you can do computation with. What is decoding and error correction all about? How do you do it? Well, essentially, it's this cycle that we have here on the right-hand side. You've got the QPU at the bottom generating a bit string, or what we call a syndrome, which characterizes the errors that have occurred on the system. And then you need to process these errors in some way via some decoding algorithm. And then you need to send a message back to the QPU to take some sort of corrective steps. It involves, you can't just use lookup tables, right? You have to have complex algorithms because basically the volume of information is too much. You also need a high throughput. And the reason for that is essentially, if I'm not decoding at the rate at which my information is getting generated, I'm going to have a massive backlog and the whole computation is going to grind down to a halt. You also need it to be low latency, and the reason for that is essentially because of things like state teleportation. It determines the latency essentially determines the logical clock rate of your quantum computer, right? And then you also need to compile the logic at the algorithmic level. You need to compile it down into these logical primitives, and you also have a good interface with the control system. Okay, so where's Riverlane sitting in the stack? So at the top here, you've got the people developing algorithms. At the bottom here, you've got control systems and QPUs. And essentially, what this picture is trying to demonstrate is where we think the interfaces for error correction are really important. So there needs to be a really important interface between the error correction stack and the control system. And there also needs to be a really important interface between the programming framework and the orchestration of the error correction hardware. Everyone likes a roadmap. This is our roadmap for the Delta Flow, for the megaquop era. We have an internal longer roadmap, but I think for the foreseeable future, having this focus is really, really valuable. So what we have here on the left-hand side, what we've demonstrated is that we can develop decoders that satisfy at the teraquop scale, actually, but just for things like quantum memory, this high throughput and low latency. So that's fantastic. Then as we go to the right, essentially what we're doing is we're getting more and more complicated quantum operations. So we have streaming memory here, so keeping a logical qubit alive indefinitely. Then we start thinking about quantum operations, but Clifford quantum operations, so things that you can still simulate classically, but will still be complicated to do in a quantum computer. And then finally, we're really talking about the full shebang, right? We've got non-Clifford operations there as well. Okay, we are a horizontal company, like many other people here, like New Quantum and so forth. So we have to deal with different qubit types. And each different qubit type puts different constraints on the error correction stack. And the way that we handle that is breaking our work up into different tracks. Here's an example of some of our tracks. In track 1, we're thinking about solid-state systems like superconducting qubits or spin qubits. And really there, we're thinking about things like the surface code. I know everybody here is, the QLDBC is the sort of fans' favorite at the moment. I don't need to sign into my Apple account, that's all right. QLDBC is the fans' favorite at the moment, but the surface code is a tried and tested error correction scheme where computation has really worked out. And I also challenge anyone in the room to take on Craig Gidney from Google, who is really embedded with the surface code. So I think the surface code still has room to play in this world. In the middle here, behind the password thing, is we're thinking more about the reconfigurable arrays where you have things like transversal logic. So we can move the qubits around in such a fashion that you can get further long-range connections. We're looking at how to do transversal logic initially with the surface code. We've had this sort of friendly rivalry with some of the researchers at Harvard and QEra with how to do transversal logic. So a flurry of papers just came out recently. I'd love to talk to people about that. And then finally, obviously, we are also super interested in QLDBC codes. I want to make that absolutely clear as well. And we've got some really great form there. We've developed some of the world's leading QLDBC decoders. I think the work that recently came out from IBM a couple of weeks ago, their BP decoder is absolutely fantastic. But we've got some great work there. Our decoder there is called AC, ambiguity clustering, and it's world-leading capabilities as well. The slide that I want to end on is about integration. Interfaces are really important, as has been said many times today. A really important interface is the interface with the QEC stack and the control system. And why do we want a well-defined interface here? Well, a lot of people think that what will happen with a decoder is you just plonk it into a control system, right? But the control system has a thing that it needs to do. And the thing it needs to do is to control the qubits, right? It needs to send pulses into the qubits to get them to operate, right? And so in order to send those pulses in, it needs to synchronize things at the picosecond and nanosecond sort of scales, okay? The quantum error correction system, it operates at a different time scale. It operates at, say, for superconducting qubits at the microsecond time scale, and for neutral atoms and ion traps, milliseconds. Maybe that comes down to hundreds of microseconds. I'd like to hear those opinions from people from QEra and Quantinuum. But they're different time scales, right? So if I embedded the decoder in the control system, I'd either optimize for one timescale and be suboptimal for the other, or optimize for neither of them, right? So I'd be suboptimal for both, right? So that's a nice reason to keep these things separate. Another reason to keep them separate is, as I referred to earlier, error correction is not just about decoding. It's about multiple decoders. It's about windowing logical computations, and it's about moving information between decoders, okay? Another thing that the control system has to do is coordinate and move information around it as well. you basically have these highways, right? If I have a highway that is being used to coordinate control pulses, and I start using that highway also to coordinate error correction, that highway is going to become bottlenecked, right? So you need these two systems separate. And so at Riverlane, we've developed this QECI, and essentially what you have on the left-hand side is a quantum control system that is completely error correction ignorant, and an error correction system on the right-hand side that is going to provide information to the signals, error correction information to the signals that are coming across. Okay, one last plug for the young people in the audience. If you want to apply for jobs, take a photo of that. Okay, I'll finish, come back to that.